I'm Suni Dillard, and I'm an architect, an associate and sustainability leader at HMFH Architects.
And I'm Alexandra Gadawski. I'm also an associate and a sustainability leader at HMFH, and we're located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So today we want to start off this conversation by talking about the why. Why is it important to be discussing material transparency? Because I think having that why in your head can be really foundational when you're thinking about these big topics. And we're going to start with the sort of global big picture why. The first reason here is we all understand the urgency around climate change and the limited amount of time we have to correct course on this issue. We also know that buildings have large impacts on operational and embodied carbon. So we need to be doing what we can do as designers to reduce this impact. We also are in a situation where every year we have increased knowledge about the impact of building materials on human health. So given what we know, I think it's incumbent on us to use this information to design healthier buildings. And then we also have some whys that are very specific to our firm and the work that we do. We primarily design schools, particularly public schools. These buildings are often a community resource that is open to all, and they can serve as a demonstration of the community's values and goals. And we have a huge opportunity here to demonstrate what is possible with sustainability and material transparency. We're also designing buildings that are primarily going to be occupied by children. And there's been a lot of research done that shows that children engage more with their materials. You might think of small children sitting on carpets, things that they're touching, and also that they process chemicals and are more impacted by their environment than adults. So we want to be really cognizant of the user groups that we're designing for and create really healthy buildings for our end occupants. I'm going to turn it over to Suni to talk about the importance of having a personal why when we're thinking about material transparency.
So Alexandra just went through why globally it's important and why we as a firm think it's important. But I just want to make sure that you also know why it's important to you. So our ability to convince others often lies within our own understanding of why this is important to us. And specifically, needing to ask yourself, why now, why this? And then inspire others to join in. Make it personal. I want to instill lifelong social and environmental stewardship in all of the occupants of the buildings that I design. So I think if we can make this personal and figure out why we're advocating for this, it goes a long way in helping others to understand why it's important for them and why they should jump on board and help out with everything that we're doing. As Alexandra said, children are not little adults. We know this from research by the CogEffect study, that by the time they graduate, they'll spend more than 15,000 hours in the school. This is a time which is critical to their physiological and social and emotional growth and development. At HMFH, it's critical for us to review the quality of indoor environments we're designing so that we can promote learning within our schools. We approach sustainability from a few different angles by addressing social, environmental, economic, and educational sustainability. The goal is to aggregate the collective interests of the communities, stakeholders, users, and whomever the building serves for a truly sustainable process. The success of a project's goals relies on how they address social needs, environmental stewardship, financial requirements, both first costs and long-term maintenance costs. And then we use education to allow our work to promote awareness long after we're gone. We call this approach a holistic approach.
So one of the things we also talk about a lot is the importance of having a goal-setting framework. In order to improve the built environment, we need to set sustainability goals with associated metrics. We want to be able to track our impact and understand throughout the design process if we're meeting our aims. So there are a number of frameworks that can be used when you're setting your goals, but today we're going to focus on the 5 topic areas that are outlined by the AIA's material pledge. This can be a really useful framework, and we would encourage you to consider this framework. And whatever option you choose for your goal setting, we would say that we want you to convey these goals across all of the disciplines so that the whole project team is on board with the big picture aims you have for material health. This really allows us to amplify our impact and achieve far bigger sustainability goals than we would otherwise. So today we're going to talk in a little bit more detail about the 5 topic areas in the AIA Pledge. We're going to discuss human health, climate health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and the circular economy.
Human health. When we design for human health, we focus on eliminating hazardous substances. We can all do this by first requesting transparency through health product declarations, or HPDs, and then by eliminating red list chemicals, which are chemicals known to cause human health risks. We can use the ILFI or the cradle to cradle red list. I would say pick one and start. Set VOC limits and advocate for emissions testing, specifically through third-party verifications. There are a bunch of different certifications that do that. Emissions testing is really important for a lot of reasons. You can design a building and not understand, and it'll have small VOCs, but if you aggregate them together in one room, it can make a big impact. I know of a project that did some air quality testing, and they adhered to all of the standards for the certification they were going after. And because the building was being occupied while they were doing it, it actually failed the air quality testing, but not because of the materials. It was actually because of the perfume and makeup that was worn by the occupants. So many things contribute to the health of our environments, not just the materials we put in them.
Next, we're going to talk a little bit about climate health. So when we're thinking about materials, we really want to prefer products that reduce carbon emissions. And ultimately, we would like to be moving towards designs that sequester more carbon than they emit. Transparency is really foundational to making informed decisions about the products we specify, and that's extremely true when we're thinking about climate health. We want to be requesting environmental product declarations for all of the products that we're specifying, with our ultimate goal being able to conduct a full building life cycle assessment so we can really accurately gauge the embodied carbon impacts of our building. I would really encourage people to ask for environmental product declarations every time you're talking to a manufacturer or a product rep, even if you know there isn't currently one available for that product, because we really want to demonstrate the importance of this information and send a signal to the market. And hopefully this is going to increase the availability of the documentation. And over the next few years, we're going to have a bank of EPDs we can draw on, and we're really going to be able to comprehensively do these life cycle assessments. When you're thinking about individual products, you might want to consider looking at the percentage of recycled content, the possibility of using materials which sequester carbon, and you also want to think about where the product is coming from and how it's going to be shipped to your site.
Ecosystem health has a bit of an overlap with the climate health. But really what we're trying to focus on is supporting natural environmental cycles and restorative practices. We will also want to use and specify products with environmental product declarations, or EPDs. EPDs evaluate the environmental impacts based on life cycle analyses. There are 2 different types. There's a product and industry. The product is better because it's more specific, means more transparent. The other thing you have to remember with EPDs is that it's not really a score, it's just giving you transparency information. So what you're really trying to do when you evaluate EPDs is avoid high impact materials, meaning avoid highly processed products like plastics and foams. Instead, use products that come from the earth like wood and stone.
We also want to be considering social health and equity and when we're making our material selections. We want to prefer products that come from manufacturers that have secured human rights all along their supply chain and their operations, and that are not negatively impacting either their employees or the communities where their facilities are located. This is really an area where we want to expand our thinking and consider the broader impact of the specification decisions we're making. And I think we can often focus on the end users of our building, the occupants, but we want to really consider everyone who's all the way along the life cycle of our products. When we're looking for products that come from manufacturers that are documenting their commitment to social and health and equity, there are a couple of things that we are looking for. We could look for a public corporate social responsibility document, and we could also look for a just label. So this label provides information on diversity and inclusion, equity, salary, worker benefits, local benefits, and stewardship. So that's a really good label to look out for when you're considering social health and equity.
Designing for circular economy focuses on reusing buildings, either by adapting or improving. And when you can't reuse and you're building new, the focus is on designing for resiliency, adaptability, and disassembly. With our other approach, it's always important to reduce construction waste and use recycled and recyclable materials as much as possible. And maybe more critical is the end of life. Seek manufacturers with end of life plans. You think about timber, and it's a natural material, but it's only effective if there's an end of life plan.
So here's where we want to encourage you to think big. We want you to not only focus on the end users of your building when you're thinking about these 5 buckets of the AIA Materials Pledge, but the impacts on humans and the environment all along the supply chain, from the point of extraction through to the end of life. How do you make sure that all the processes involved in creating the materials you specify are not negatively impacting the people and the environment at each point on the life cycle? And how can you make sure early on in the project that when you're setting your big picture goals, that you're considering these impacts? There are many materials that can be benign when they're installed in the building that you've designed, but they could be causing issues somewhere else along the life cycle. For example, downstream from a manufacturing facility. Specification can be a very powerful tool, and when done carefully, it can be very impactful and really help us create a better and more sustainable world. So as we mentioned at the beginning of the project, we primarily work on public schools. As part of the public bid laws in Massachusetts and many other locations, we are required to specify 3 equals for all of the products that go into our buildings. And this adds a real layer of complexity and research into everything we do. We might find one product with fantastic material transparency documentation, but if we can not find 2 more products with this documentation, we are not able to require it. And this transparency is so foundational to making better choices about the materials we specify. And in order to be able to get these products, these healthy materials with their low embodied carbon, all these attributes that support our goals into our projects, we really need to see an increase in the number of products with material transparency documentation. There's been so many exciting innovations in material health and embodied carbon, so many great new products coming onto the market, but we still need to keep pushing for more. Until we have a number of products that allows us to have 3 equals and use these materials on public work, we're leaving people out of this transition to a more sustainable built environment. And we really believe that for true sustainability, we need to have equity, and we need everyone to be able to have access to these better materials. We really want to create accessible and affordable solutions that can be applied to all project types. And public schools are often constructed on a tight timeline with modest budgets. So we're going to talk about some solutions today. And even if you're not working on a public school, we think these solutions have broad applicability. Because if we can do them on our timeline and our time budget, we think that you're going to be able to translate these to your projects. So one of the things we said is that we need to have transparency to make our decisions. So standards, labels, and declarations provide verified information on the impacts of the products we're using. So when we're thinking about material transparency, we're looking at a combination of standards. And so I'm going to start off by talking about the ones that we're focusing on internally when we're looking at human health and the ranking system we came up for these standards. Depending on your project and your project goals, you might be prioritizing different labels, but we're going to give you an example of what we're doing. So you can see at the top, we would absolutely prioritize having products with declare labels indicating that they're red list free. The declare label is disclosing all the ingredients down to the level of 100 parts per million. This would absolutely be our priority. If we can't get this on all of our projects, all of the products going into our buildings, we start by prioritizing our interior finishes and our touch surfaces, the things that people are going to be engaging with the most. If we can't find red list free products, then we're looking for products that have a declare label and red list approved. So red list approved is disclosing 99% of the ingredients in the final product, and it meets the red list, LBC red list imperative, but it might have some exceptions. After that, we're prioritizing products that have cradle to cradle platinum and then cradle to cradle gold and have declare labels with declared status. So when we're looking at documentation, that's what we're considering our hierarchy. You can see we've broken this chart out to align with AIA material pledge buckets. And you can see that for some of these standards, for example, the declare label, you might on some labels be able to find some information on embodied carbon or end of use, but we're primarily looking at these labels for human health. And I would say the bulk of their weight, particularly the declare label, is weighted in that direction. I think it's really important to note here that you're unable to get a complete picture about a product from one label, and you're going to need to consider what combination of labels might be appropriate on your project to get the information you need. You can see here, we're not looking into these standards, for example, for information on ecosystem health or social health and equity. So Suni is going to talk to you about some other standards and labels we look for so that we can get a full picture of the material impacts.
So material transparency for environmental health. We talked about how to evaluate human health, and we know that material transparency is important for environmental health. We just went through a few of those reasons, but we know through science that when we disrupt the Earth's natural processes, carbon sequestration and storage, for example, there are ripple effects throughout all systems. We can review these disruptions from products and buildings through life cycle analyses and weigh our decisions in each impact category. Global warming potential, acidification, smog formation, ozone depletion, those are just a few, but are some of the ones that we typically look at. We know that waste produced and energy use is different at all stages of a product's life and formation. And it's important to pay attention to where a product comes from and how it's processed. So reduction as analyzed by an LCA in multiple categories is key. LCAs use EPDs, and so the importance of asking for transparency in requesting EPDs allows us to analyze the life cycle of each of these products more effectively. We don't want to just think about human health and environmental health. We also want to think about social justice. A truly sustainable environment will address all aspects and impacts buildings and materials have on the most vulnerable populations. We're not just reviewing products. We know chemical plants and refineries are disproportionately located in low-income neighborhoods, and we make choices in our selections not to support this process and try to understand the social and economic, as well as environmental issues associated with our decisions. We must choose to prioritize inclusion and diversity at all stages of the design process.
Thanks, Suni. So standards can also play an important role in achieving our goals around material transparency. While this is not an exhaustive list, it shows some of the commonly used building rating systems and how they might overlap with the AIA materials pledge buckets. So based on your goals and what you're focusing on, that might point you in the direction of one or another of these rating systems. When we're setting goals, we want to start with the big picture of the pledge buckets and then work backwards to look at what standards might support these aims. We don't want to be starting off our visioning by thinking, which lead credits we want to achieve. We want to, have that big overview and then work backwards and think how we can use standards and rating systems to support these aims. Standards can also be useful because they allow you to benchmark your building against another project and can be a way to track your improvements and your increased sustainability across your design portfolio over time. So even if you're not able to achieve full building certification with these standards, they can be a really valuable guide. For example, you might have a project that's going to be achieving LEED certification, but if you really want to push the envelope on material health, you could look to the guidance WELL provides when you're making decisions about product selection.
So we use a variety of resources to weigh our decisions. Like Alexandra said, oftentimes we don't always go for certification, so we can use those as resources and guides. But there are a variety of databases that you can use to access product data and material choices. It's important for us to keep up to date with the knowledge communities, and these are just a few that we use in our practice.
So now we're going to talk to you about some strategies for implementation. We want you to leave with things that you can apply right now on your projects.
Easy wins, efficiency. Efficiency is not just about materials, it's about a process for thinking, it's a process for reviewing and sharing. Using less material is always better. We want to be as efficient with our materials and our processes as we would with the building program, so that we're not adding cost, we're not adding material. We can do that by using manufacturer standard sizes and really just thinking about how we can use materials for different systems.
So we're going to talk you through some product categories. It could be really daunting. You want to take on material transparency and you have so many spec sections to look at. So we're going to talk through some easy wins, some sections you can tackle right now where there's great availability of transparency documentation. And we're going to start off by talking about acoustic ceiling tiles. This might sound like a really humble product. It's so common, you might not even really think about it or question it when you're designing. And it's possible that you have thousands or even hundreds of thousands of square feet of it in your buildings. Because of the volume of this product that's used, better decisions in this category can have a huge potential to shift the dial on sustainability. We've done quite a bit of research into ceilings, and we've been able to find 3 equals for a variety of different ceiling tiles with varying acoustic performance. We found 3 that are red list free, as noted in a clear label, and they additionally have environmental product declarations and health product declarations. So this is really something that we've been excited to adopt as a standard and think that this is a really easy spec section for people to take on. It's also an easy win because there's really very little visual difference in these products. So there's no design implications to shifting to a better product option here. Acoustic room components are another easy win. There are many types of acoustic products that go into our buildings, everything from wood baffles to PET felts, perforated wood acoustic panels, as you can see here, and wood fiber panels. We have these on our walls and our ceilings. And we've been able to find in every category of acoustic products, 3 equals with declare labels and EPDs for our commonly used product. Depending on your project type, you might be using some variation of this, but this is a category where there's a huge amount of documentation. So I'd really encourage you to take this on. One thing you want to be cautious about in this category, as well as in the ACT, is making sure that the labels you're looking at cover the assemblies, or if they don't, you understand what the documentation is referencing, because they often don't cover attachment systems or backing. So you want to think about this when you're designing and detailing, because if you choose this amazing material, it's red list free, and then you use some type of adhesive to glue it to your wall, you might be going against some of the bigger picture goals you have. You know, we want to think about sustainability holistically, and many building standards that we showed above, such as LEED and WELL, have acoustic credits. So focusing on acoustics can really increase the occupant well-being, but you don't want to do this at the expense of human health and considering healthy materials. So when you're designing, you need to be balancing these 2 things. And there's a lot of good options in these categories. So we think this is a great thing that you can do today.
Another easy win, carpet. New products are coming out all the time. Red list free, EPDs, HPDs are abundant. Some go further and are carbon negative, biophilic. Really, it's choosing your type, the pile, the color, the material, and then reviewing the backing and adhesion and surface treatments. It's, like Alexandra said, it's all in the assemblies. You want to look for carpets that use tacks and not adhesive. So that goes back to the circular economy and thinking about disassembly. Oftentimes carpet gets spilled on, so you want to think about how you would replace that through its useful life. You want to avoid stain resistant treatments. Those often have PFAS chemicals in them, and we've all heard about the dangers of that in the news lately and what that does to drinking water and human health. We want to avoid vinyl or polyurethane backings. Those are also red list chemicals, and we just want to pay attention to what's underneath the products and in the assemblies. Sometimes the backings have fly ash in them, which can be it can be a harmful chemical. It's both a byproduct of the fossil fuel industry, and it can have mercury or toxic metals in it. Resilient flooring. I think we can all agree that we can just stop using vinyl. There are plenty of alternatives out there. PVC, though inert in its installed state, is toxic at the manufacturing stage, when it's burned, and in the landfills. There are multiple manufacturers with linoleum, which is both better for maintenance and the environment. You can use rubber. You want to look for natural rubber. Most manufacturers nowadays, or many, aren't using natural rubber, so just pay attention to that. And then be cautious of post-consumer recycled vinyl. I know we said that recycling is good, but in this particular case, it's still not good. It can contain PCBs, and it's still vinyl. So if it's burned, it can be really toxic to those fighting those fires. And then watch for VOCs in the binders and adhesives again.
All right. So I would love to say that gypsum is another easy win. And if you are working on private projects, it might be. But for public work and 3 equals, we're still considering this a challenge. This is another product that we use in vast quantities. So improving what we specify has the potential to be hugely impactful. We have found one option that has an EPD, which indicates lower embodied carbon compared to a typical gypsum product, and also has material health information, but we have not been able to find 2 suitable equals. So if you're doing private work, I would consider this an easy win in looking into your options, but we're still in a position where we need to continue to ask for documentation and advocate for increased transparency. This is another product that has very few to or no aesthetic ramifications. So this is an easy switch in your design. It's not going to impact the appearance. It's not going to impact your detailing. It's simply a couple of different lines of text in your specifications. So if you're able to do this, I would really encourage you to do it. And I also encourage you to think about other healthy product switches you can make without impacting your design. These are a couple that we use a lot, but depending on the kind of work you do, you might have some other products that could be easy switches. So the next category we're going to talk about is PVC. And I would say this is a universally challenging product, no matter what kind of design work you're doing, because it is ubiquitous in the built environment. It's in many visible components, as well as in a huge number of things that we have hidden in our walls and under our floors. This is one of those products that might not cause an issue when it's in place in our building, but we know that it has negative impacts all along the supply chain. We also know it has the possibility to be hazardous to building occupants or firefighters in the event of a fire in our building, because it can be toxic when burned. It is so common, and so it's very hard to remove entirely from our buildings, but we are certainly asking for PVC-free products and letting people know this is important to us. And we're particularly focusing right now on touch surfaces and products that people are engaging with. One thing we want to watch out here for, and Suni mentioned a little bit about this when she was talking about flooring, but we want to watch about PVC by other names and branding. For example, one thing that's come up on our project recently is UPVC, and we've sort of made a decision that this falls into the same category, and we want to keep this out of our projects as well. There's huge opportunities for advocacy, and we hope that we're going to be able to be eventually at a point where we can take this entirely out of our buildings.
There's a lot of back and forth between building performance and material health, and I think you can see that in insulation a lot, and you can also see it in windows. Alexandra was talking about PVC, and there's a huge stride toward UPVC windows now. So trying to weigh the benefit of materials and their impact on building performance and material health is really important. With insulation, less is more. So we think about insulation and the value per inch. Sometimes we go toward foam, but this is a highly processed material, and the installation of it is actually worse than the material itself. So the blowing agents that are used, people have to wear a hazmat suit. So anytime you see the need to wear a hazmat suit for insulation, we should just avoid that material altogether. Instead, use materials like cork or wood fiber or cellulose or mineral fiber or wool or denim. The list goes on. You can use fiberglass. When you use fiberglass, use unfaced fiberglass. This is a product where the industry has actually reformulated to be formaldehyde free, and that's something that's really important to look at with all board insulation. The binders will sometimes contain formaldehyde, so make sure that you're looking at products that don't use that. Use cellulose. It's an incredibly inexpensive product, and then install these products with mechanical fasteners instead of adhesives so that they can be disassembled or reused. And then another component that we find to be quite challenging is structure. There aren't a lot of options. We've got wood, steel, concrete. Again, this goes back to using products efficiently. Using less is always better. Review the circular economy. My gut says wood when we think about that, but it may not always work for your budget. And you have to always use FSC. The transparency all the way back to extraction is incredibly important for timber. It's not just for the material health, but that's ecosystem health. And you have to have an end of life plan, or all of the benefits of sequestering carbon and using timber in your product just go into the landfill. Steel is always recycled, but you have to specify it. Make sure that the steel comes from electric arc furnaces. And then with concretes, use supplemental cementitious materials, or SCMs, but be careful of fly ash. It does contain mercury and toxic chemicals, and it does support the fossil fuel industry.
Now, for our last challenge here, we're going to talk about an area where we're really at a point where we're pushing for more information. And that's when we're thinking about mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and lighting. So ultimately, as we said earlier, we would love to have this disclosure for not only the architectural products, but every component that's going into our buildings. This will allow us to understand the overall impacts of our design decisions and ultimately push towards conducting a full building life cycle assessment. When you're tackling this topic, one of the first things I would say you need to do is make sure you bring all of your consultants and the full project team on board with the big picture goals. If you're using a framework such as the AIA Materials Pledge, make sure all your consultants understand what those 5 buckets are and how that might impact the design work they're doing. For example, when we're talking about PVC, we're going to want to get our electrical engineer on board. And I'd also encourage you to ask questions. Maybe your consultants have discipline specific knowledge that they can bring to the table, and they might know of innovative products or solutions to suggest. How often have you asked your electrical engineer about the material health of the products they're specifying? Or have you asked your plumbing engineer about the embodied carbon impact of their system? Could they specify different materials? Could they reroute things to be more efficient? I think we're really at a stage where we need to just be asking those questions and seeing what the responses are, and then working from there. But looping everyone into these goals, I think, as Suni mentioned, is just so crucial to getting this data we need and making this progress. Now, I think, Suni and I are both on the architectural side, and I think as designers, you feel like you have a lot of responsibility around product specification. But if you really step back and think about it, think about what materials are in your building, how many hundreds or possibly thousands of different products, both the things that have a big aesthetic design decision and the things we might not think about, such as the adhesives, the glues, nails, and then think about who specifies them. And you might find out that the sort of architectural side is responsible for a smaller component than you might have imagined. So when we really want to make big moves on material transparency, we need to have all the team members on board, everyone from landscape and civil through MEP and fire protection. We really just need everyone aligning behind these big picture goals and pushing as far as they can with the available products.
Biggest thing that we'll say is advocate. We can't do it alone. We have to advocate to our peers, with our consultants, to our consultants, to the communities, and provide education so that we can understand the whole picture. And then think about how you can use your designs and the process to teach others long after we've left. We know that material health and transparency is a complicated topic, and we debate this all the time in our office, and there are pros and cons of vinyl or PVC with materials if you compare them to like aluminum, and so you really just have to weigh the material health versus the environmental health. So it's really just sort of a series of scales that you're moving back and forth, and then you just have to hold each other accountable. And we've done that by signing up with the AIA Materials Pledge. And we've also done that by signing the advocacy letter for lighting. And this brings people together. It shows that you're there to support efforts, and you're not, even if you're not directly in control of them. The other thing that we do to hold ourselves accountable is to sign up for commitments. We've signed up to the 2030 challenge. We report to AIA 2030 through the 2030 challenge and provide them data. Our commitment is to design carbon neutral buildings by 2030. We also, like Alexandra said, advocate and educate our consultants on this. We provide them with a letter about our goals and hope that they'll, and expect them, not just hope, to help with this on all of our projects, because we can't do it alone. And then we tell them about the structural engineers 2050 commitment and the MEP 2040 commitment, and hope that they'll also join and get on board with that.
We wanted you to leave with some action steps that you could take back to your project teams today. And we're just going to summarize it here so you can take this slide away with you. We want to really emphasize the importance of setting your goals early and conveying this across the whole project team. People often say you can't improve what you're not tracking, so we'd really encourage you to have tracking metrics around material transparency. That could be the type of documentation you're looking for, the number of products, the part of the building. I also think it's really important to assign responsibility to the appropriate team members so everyone feels engaged and accountable. And we all know design is a very iterative process. So we would encourage you to set timelines and checkout periods. So as people are working through the design, they're reporting back on these goals so you know that you're moving in the right direction. We'd also encourage you to use the discipline-specific knowledge of everyone that makes up your project team. Ask the questions, and you might be surprised by some innovative solutions that people can provide. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was fantastic to speak about this topic that's so important to us. We're delighted to be here.